say that it feels right.
What's up, guys? It's the Blender, and we're going over the build guide from our Throw in Hands build. If you want to like through that playthrough, had a couple requests for a build guide specifically, so I'm going to go ahead and make that. Figured I'd start here with where we start on stats. For anybody who wants to skip all that or prefers a written guide, I will have that in the description of the video. Not a written guide, but at least the link to the must-have perk points to set up the build. And then this particular guide will be a little bit more exhaustive. I'm going to go over as many of the perks and synergies, etc., and explain things out pretty well for any new players. So if that interests you and you like all the technical stuff, etc., then stick around. This is sort of like up your alley, right? If not, and you just want to skip to maybe a showcase or whatnot, then I have the 8-second smasher kill video, and I have the Don't Fear the Reaper run. Both of those show, I believe, the build, and is set up right after the function. And then in addition to that, you could also watch the playthrough if you're wondering what I prioritize during leveling and so on and so forth. So without further ado, this is going to be probably a little bit longer, so let's get into it. As for start outs, it is a body build. We are looking to punch things, shotgun things, etc., etc. So we're going to do that. We're going to max out body. Reflex is good, but reflex is one of the things I actually don't get till later until I want dash. So we only need to go to 4 here, and then we press technical ability to max, right? Cool. Again, not going to be utilizing it very often. Doesn't have any big dialogue functions that we want to do. This allows us to open up the doors. This allows us to rip open doors. These two basically become dump stats, and this is the last stat that we're ever going to push forward anyway, right? Now reflexes is kind of there's a conversation as I'm doing the leveling where like I'm choosing between reflexes and getting the dash versus getting, additional cyberware capacity, and those are sort of like up to you what your flavor is, etc., etc. But this is the stats that I would start off with one of these characters, especially if the goal is to get through the prologue, get through Konpeki, put on, basically a melee weapon, and then never look back. If that's the goal, then this is sort of the setup I would do. Now we gotta exit all those changes, and we're gonna load our melee guy here. Now I believe his talent tree is all sorts of messed up, so we will have to adjust that, but I'll explain what we're doing as we do it. So here he is. The weapons, these were weapons that I was using to level skills. Not a big deal. Clothing, pick your favorite, doesn't really matter. If you're looking for hyper optimization all throughout the run, then I take melee damage resistance, armor, quick hack damage resistance, and then you'd probably get zoom speed if you are using a weapon. There is no upload of quick hacks available in Berserk function, so this does me absolutely nothing, but I thought it looked cooler than the other garbage, even though I've transmogged the whole thing and I don't use it. So if you're looking for looks, transmog. If you're looking for stats, pick what you want, right? These really, like 25 armor is not going to make or break the bank. The quick hack damage resistance is going to be important, but by the time you get 15% like this, it's not going to be as important because we're able to back-to-back pop our berserks, which is already giving us damage resistance anyway. Same thing with the head. So pick your favorite. Do what you want. As far as, let's start with skill progression. Skill progression, we want to get here. There are some synergies that may or may not make sense, so we'll just kind of go over them pretty quick and sort of like touch on them again. We always want 15 and we always want 35. 15 gives us the first perk point, 35 gives us the second perk point. Each one of these, right, like Netrunner doesn't have anything else that we really want, so we don't push it. Headhunter, you don't have to go to 60 because we don't actually get anything from Focus and Deadeye. I naturally ended up at 60 because of the way it levels, right? However, this 55 is effective for our build because these damage bonuses happening outside of combat, we trigger them when we pop our optical camo and become undetected. And so we trigger them, and then we get to utilize those and carry them through our time outside of combat. Now, this is more for mobbing. It's not going to necessarily apply to bosses and things. We're not using optical camo for Atom Smasher, etc., etc. But fun little thing, right? Optical camo, active grappling, stuff like that. Increased vulnerabilities, vulnerabilities and headshots, right? Like it's decreased visibility. Like these are all good, right? But effectively, we're just going for this 55 slot. In Netrunner, like I said, we're only going to 35. We don't really care about the rest of this, like the increased RAM cost, duration, etc. We don't care. We just want the perk point. In Shinobi, we're going for 55 because we want it to, when we're outside of our berserk window and we are, spamming our punches. If we hit low stamina, we don't want our speed and accuracy and everything else to be affected by that. So that's what that does. Additionally, we get increased damage with fast attacks. It's also pretty good. And then we get mitigation chance when we're sprinting, and the faster we move. Air dashing, reloading weapons doesn't matter for us if we're not using any weapons. If you are, more power to you, right? The build has enough points that you do actually get to sort of choose what you want. It basically has like almost full power, somewhere around like 40, 45, depending on if you're maximizing acquiring perks. We'll skip solo for the second, make that last. Engineer, we want cyberware capacity. We get a little bit out of here. We get, I think we get like 15% increase and whatnot, and then we eventually get 30% to all cyberware stat modifiers. Now this is basically like the big one that you want to go for on every character, because this is what turns a 5% mod, like a 5% melee mod, into a 6.8% melee mod, because it takes 30% of that modifier and adds it. So basically it's just a 1.3x on whatever that base roll is. As long as you have this is also retroactive. You don't have to have this before you craft. So if you manage to craft or before you have this, then some of those numbers will increase when you finally get it. The hard part is that I understand sort of like what my maximum numbers are at the end values. So like if it's in tier 5 and it's melee and I have this ability, I know I'm at 7.5. Right? Like I know that's what my max is, right? And I know that top tier roll is like 7.2 to 7.5, right? I know that. But if I don't have this ability, is that 5.2? Is that 5.0? Right? I don't know which tier the 5.0 or 5.2 or 5.3 is in, right? Maybe 5.5, right? Like you sort of have to learn what those other tiers are. And what those lower value rolls are in order to be like, oh, that's a max damage roll, I'm fine, right? If you're willing to do the math and learn those lower sections, then this, you don't have to get this. I usually get this before I craft, typically because grinding these skills out is also how I'm grinding my components. This doesn't really give us anything. We're not using bolt shots, but 60 is EMP blast whenever Fury is active. Fury does activate on the character. It's sort of weird as how it activates and when it can activate, but it does activate at some points, and it is nice to have this bonus EMP blast, and it also synergizes with our Pyromania tree, which we'll get into. With that being said, skills-wise, there are a couple different iterations you can do here. I like 20 body, 20 reflex, 20 tech, and 18 cool. That was my choice. There are different options, right? You don't need 20 reflexes, right? Obviously, we are past the crit cap by 8%. Oh, that's right. I didn't do the solo. Here, this is... obviously we get the perks, but at 40 we get 10% crit against enemies within 5 meters, basically melee range. This is super important, and the reason for this is because we're already getting to like 58%, and then we're getting a bunch of crit out of our operating system. If we were using a Sandy, right? We would get 40% crit. If we're getting 40% crit from our Sandy and 10% crit out of here, right? Like in a Dave Martinez build, you're getting 50% crit from these two functions, right? That means that if you're wearing Cockatrice Eyes for 35%, you're at 85. You only have to eke out 15% crit out of the rest of your functionalities, right? Whatever that is. We are doing very similar, right? Our Biodyne Berserk provides us a 40% crit. So our operating system is giving us this 40% crit. And because of that, the way we have our gear set up, we actually exceed and get to 108% crit. So that's one of the things, right? We get damage with melee attacks, finisher health. We get Adrenaline Rush. This is important for the no decay part below 10%. This allows us to start fights with Adrenaline Rush, which gives us increased damage and stuff like that. Also helps us to prevent ourselves from being knocked down or being staggered, etc. And then Berserk Enemy Threshold. This is huge for the combo that we do to kill Smasher. Other than that, extra health from performing finishers is whatever. Berserk duration is good, and especially since we're using a Biodyne Berserk rather than a Militech Berserk, the cooldown, the duration to cooldown window is significantly longer between a Biodyne versus a Militech. Militech actually closes that gap pretty well, but the differences between the two are pretty substantial, and I find that I don't prefer the Militech over the Biodyne, and Militech's probably more comfortable, and you could definitely do the game with it, right? But I find the Militech to be less punchy, less powerful than Biodyne, and I want that extra 40% crit from the Biodyne, so I'm always choosing Biodyne. In here, different worlds, right? So like I was saying, I like this setup. Different worlds would be maybe you take 15 here, and you don't take this to 18. You get 9 into intelligence. That gives you a +4 from this technical ability, right? The Renaissance Punk, right? And so you would get to a 360 maximum capacity, right? It gives you 4 more cyberware. I'm pretty set on and pretty solid on what I have in my cyberware, so I'm pretty happy with where I'm at. I wouldn't do that personally. You could take 3 of these out of here and go to 15, right, and put them in here and go to 6. That's possible, but I don't see why you would go to 6 if you're not getting into the next tier, right? If you're not getting 4 and then 15 and then 20, right? So like the only other threshold is 9, right? So like 4 gets you the baseline stuff, 9 gets you the extra cyberware capacity, 15 gets you the second tier, and 20 gets you the third tier, right? So I don't think I would sacrifice 3 cool for 3 intelligence. I could see if you wanted like the ability to do some sort of hacking, like on a car or something like that, you have to equip a cyber deck, right? For a punch build, I don't think intelligence makes any sense, unless you're going for cyberware capacity. So for me, it's 9 or nothing here, right? But there's also the possibility that you swap this and just swap these entirely, right? And this goes to 20, so you get the more crit damage, and you go to 18 reflexes. It will reduce your crit because we get percentage crit on our Biodyne based off, I believe, reflexes. We'll take a look, but I'm pretty sure it's off reflexes. And then, so like taking 2 points out of here would just reduce us by 2%. We'd be overcapped by 6 at that point instead of 8. And then, obviously, cool is crit damage per point. And once we're at crit cap, right, crit damage is the most important part. Like flat well, I guess you could say percentage based or percentage base increase along with crit percent, right? They become basically competing values in the damage formula. So this is the way I have it set up. Stats wise, right, just to show, we have the 58% crit, which when we pop Biodyne Berserk goes to 98 with the 10% in melee is conditional, so it does not show up in this space, right? Because it's specific to that condition of that enemy, etc. So that's how we're getting to the 108. And obviously, we'd get a 100% increase on here, so we'd have almost 200% crit damage. We do have 115 melee damage, which is good. And this 15% bonus stealth damage, this is what sort of like helps with those that optical camo thing that I was talking about, where like when we pop optical camo, we get to keep these damage bonuses. This is, I believe, still additive, so it's not a huge buff, right? It's basically just taking 15%, adding it here. So during the time frames where we pop optical camo and we start killing people and that extends, etc., we get this added onto this, basically. With that being said, 115 is, it's not crazy good, it's not crazy bad, right? Theoretical max here is, I think, 165. If you had ambidextrous, so you had 22 slots, and then you had melee damage on every one of those slots, it's like, yeah, it's like 165 or 160, something like that. It's somewhere close to like 155, 165 is like your theoretical max, right? At 7.5 for every slot. That would be great, but I started to feel like when in 2.1 I did this build, I recreated this build for 2.3, but in 2.1 when I did this build, I only got to like 60% melee damage, and I was able to kill Smasher in 10 seconds, right? This extra 50% melee damage or so, right, 54%, cut 2.5 seconds off of the kill, or 2.25 seconds off the kill, right? So is it worth the investment? That's up to you, right? But if you push this by another 50%, I don't have the mod to do it, and I'm not going to install the mod to do it. But if you did, I could see a world where if you optimize the gear to be absolutely perfect, I could see a world where you phase Smasher too quickly, and so you don't get your jailbreak powered up in time, and so the combo never goes off, and so you actually increase how the Smasher kill, you increase how long it's going to take, because you had too much damage. I could see a world where you had too much damage and you broke the combo. Speaking of which, let's get into some of these, right? We'll go with cool. First off, we had a whole bunch of things in here for leveling skills that we don't need. Like I said, you have points all over the place that are, they're good, but not necessary, right? These are the ones that I would take. This allows us to get an optical camo, and then gives us a little bit of like increased health, stamina, movement speed after we kill somebody while optical camo is active. We're going to kill people all the time, and then we should also get this creeping death function for 3 seconds after we come out of optical camo. In addition to that, we get movement speed while we're undetected. So once we're detected from that, right, like we won't get it, but we could get it, and then hitting people right after being detected delays the detection. So this sort of like combos to get us into optical camo while giving us movement speed, health, stamina, etc. And just basically lets us zip even though we popped our optical camo, right? And when we come out of optical camo, we still get those buffs, and we get to delay how long until that happens. So this is the cool tree that I would go with. You can get Vanishing Act. It's not a bad perk, but in my experience, using the Crouch Sprint Vanishing Act does not work the same as manually activating the optical camo. For some reason, when I pop optical camo manually, then I can disappear from Smasher. If I try to do it with this, he knows where I am regardless, and he will just outright kill me. And then I'll use it. I'll have to wait for the charge to come back, right? Like it just turns the fight into a mess. So, and I don't use it on the Berserk build, all right? But I did experience this with the Netgunner build, so I figured I'd let you know about that, right? At least for synergies. Other than that, we've got 7 perks. We're going to pull some more, right? Chip Connoisseur here, we do not need. You do need it for crafting. That's how you get the, the 3rd slot. But taking that taking that, well, it's how you fish for the correct modifier, right? You could, if you were just had permanent resources, you would never need this, right? But this saves you on a bunch of resources, so we don't need it. Once our crafting is done, we don't need it. Same thing here with crafting components from looting. We don't need it, right? Because we're done with our crafting. We want to keep all these. Ambidextrous. My cyberware is not using 2 hand pieces. Now, you could utilize this, but since this one requires all cyberware slots be filled, I'm only using 1, and this piece is here. I'm not getting this guy's benefit. So we're going to go ahead and take that out. And then cellular adapter was really, really good, and I know a lot of people like it. It was great while leveling, but I don't use it in the final build. So since I don't use it in the final build, we can take that one out too. The rest of these are all good. So to explain these, driver update gives you the 3rd modifier stat, right, on your gear. It's basically required for all builds, right? You want that, yeah, unless you're doing an organic build, then so be it, right? Reconnaissance Punk, this gives us the +4. This is why in that other version where you go to 9 intelligence, you would then have 9 in every stat, which would give you a +4 cyberware capacity beyond what I have. I have 356, right, which is the maximum for capacity for a legitimate character with Edgerunner, right? It would be 306 if he didn't have one, and that requires that I have, those 3 stats at 20. If I or 4 stats at 20, right? Cyberware capacity. It would be 310 if you have all 5 stats at 20, all right? Which basically means that if you do not have this perk at all, you'd be like 290, right? So there are a lot of builds out there that have 420 cyberware capacity, or they have, 372 cyberware capacity, or something like some 380 or something like that. Unless you're like, the only way to get to 400, which I think is 426 or 427, is to utilize Edgerunner, get all the perks, all the cyberware shards, and Chrome Compressor. But, alright, if you see somebody who's like, check out my build, right, this is so crazy, etc., and they're running around with 400 cyberware capacity, they're sitting up here, and it shows that it's right here, right, because this is sort of like this view changes based off what your maximum is, right, etc. But if they're sitting at like 400 or 372, right, and it's right here, right, and it looks the same, it's going to be red like this, right, and they're sitting at 372 with extra capacity, then you know that they either glitched their cyberware shards on their playthroughs, or they edited their file in order to get more access to more things and play it that way. It's not what you would call legit. With that being said, we get this Chrome Constitution. This is percent damage if your skeleton and our augmentary are full, right? Now this gives you an extra open for that, right? The less cost, right? And so we basically have to. This is the one that gives another skeleton slot. So we have to fill those slots in order for this to work. So we do make some compromises in cyberware function, right? Potentially, right, depending on how we build it. Duration for cyberware effects, increased duration for berserk, and get optical camo, and then reduce cooldown for those things. That's all good. Edgerunner obviously gives us a +50 to our cyberware capacity. The Fury state is basically this 0.1% per point. We're maxed out, so we have 5% chance to enter a Fury state during combat, and it says it's just it says it's a 0.1% chance for each point you're over capacity that you will enter a Fury state in this state you gain, right? But it's based off kill. So you have a 5% chance every time you kill somebody to enter into the Fury state. Now, from my experience, I do not believe this can proc while you are in a cyberware state. So if you fire off and you hit your berserk, right, what I have seen most often is that I will be in berserk and then I'll come out of berserk, and coming out of berserk I'll then proc into Fury, right? And same thing with Sandevistan and Overclock. I have never been able to confirm whether this is able to proc while in it. I have been able to confirm with some of like those EMP blast stuff that if it procs before you go in it, right, that it will maintain, not entirely through it, but you get like every kill increases the duration of the Fury active, right? And that's the bottom line down there, right? So like since you're going crazy, it's in damage, it's easy to kill things and extend this duration. I wish this had a much higher proc rate chance so that it had a more viability for like Chrome compressor builds, but or the Chrome compressor had an innate function that made this go off at 50, a 10x, where this went off at a 50% chance, so that you could enter this Fury state. But I think these multipliers, the damage, the crit chance, and the crit damage, I think these are separate multipliers, because when this procs, I feel nearly as powerful as I do with Biodine Berserk, right? Like at least on that damage output, like it's nuts. So I think these are separate multipliers against all the other things, because the Fury State is a condition that you get, right? I think that that makes it super powerful, but because of the low percent chance and like it not being able to, at least in my experience, proc during the Berserk function or the Sandy function, we're going for the cyborg capacity, not for the ability, not for the Fury ability. It's sort of a icing on the cake type thing. With that being said, we move over into our Pyromania tree here. We get Transfusion, increased health when it goes off and it's the last one. This is like a last line of defense type ability. Recharge speed when you've only used one, so this sometimes goes off, sometimes it doesn't. It's going to be rare that we are only using one, but there is time, and when that happens, it sort of helps us stay on the top end of our health packs, etc. Faster use of medical items or health items in combat. I'm not entirely sure if this is just about the animation to use it, or if this increases the speed at which the health, once used, actually applies to your character. If the latter, then this is god tier ability, amazing, right? If the former, then Biomonitor makes this useless, right? So up to your discretion. This build has a lot of extra capacity because it has all of its mandatory functions online really, really early, right? As you can see, we have 11 perks, right? Just extra at the moment. So no big here. Like, I would just spend this point rather than having to go test it. If you want to test it, please let me know in the comments, right? Whether or not this is good or bad. Borrowed time. Instant recharge if you're below health. This helps us sort of stay on the bottom end. Our Biodine Berserk doesn't give us immunity from all damage like Militech Berserk does, so we're ping-ponging off the bottom. We'll take damage, hit 25%. This will then register as 25%. We kill somebody, we get a charge. Our Biomonitor uses that charge. We pop up in health. We take some more damage. We come down to 25%. We're now down at 25%. We kill somebody, it pops up. Right, just sort of helps us ping pong off the bottom of our health bar. Pyromania, more recharge speed for health items, movement speed and explosion damage. And this does per stack, if I recall correctly, right? Hitting an enemy, grenade explosive if you take damage. With an explosion from a grenade, explosive device, or projectile launch system. So I believe explosive device, these explosions will still count, like the EMP stuff, but no, I'm not 100% sure. I do know that they fire off here. So yeah, it's got to stack, right? Because it's basically talking about this, right? So Pyromania procs off of Ticking Time Bomb, Shock and Awe, and off of the Edge Runner pop from Engineer, right? So what that means, basically those EMP blasts, right? What that means is that so long as we're basically running around doing things, we will have Heat Shield, which is 50% mitigation chance. in total. So we'll basically always have this 50% base all the time, and then we also have 50% resistance to damage from effects from explosions that we cause, right? So this should help us keep us from giving ourselves if we blow something up and it blows up, etc., etc. We won't actually be throwing grenades, but you could throw grenades and that'd be good. This would also be super good if you're using a Doom launcher. And that should be the tech tree. I'm not, like I said, we're not doing tech specifically or tech grenades or grenades specifically, so we're not worried about the grenade recharges. In reflexes, again, you have options, right? Like I like Tailwind and I wanted to get the full 40% out of my Biodyne Berserk. So I go 20 reflexes. If you went the other, where you went 15, you would remove 5%. You'd still be overcapped on your crit by 1% when you pop Biodyne Berserk. So, I mean, if you can pull this down to 15, and you don't care or need Tailwind, you're like, I can do it without it and I'm comfortable, right? Pull this down to 15, adjust that the way you want it, right? Add that extra cyberware capacity, right? Like, do your thing, right? But I like being able to jump dash, right? Dash jump, right? And not worry in any way, shape, or form about my stamina. Like when I have it, if I use this ability, I've got all my stamina back, right? Like this basically just means that anytime I'm traversing or utilizing my dash, etc., I'm going to have the stamina to utilize my abilities. Now, Berserk has 0 stamina cost, right? Like it takes away the stamina cost. So maybe there's an argument there that says you're berserking when you're in combat and you're just dashing when you're not in combat, right? So why do you need it? Fair point, right? Fair point. But I want the 20. I want the extra crit off of the Biodyne, and I want this dash, this Tailwind. Is it 100% necessary? I think there's some arguments to be made that say it's not, but up to you, right? Strength, mitigation strength in midair. Like I said, we're already popping Pyromania with 50%. We get 30% mitigation strength in midair. That means that 50% chance is now reducing us by 30%, right? So anything else that we have that increases our mitigation strength is just making it so that we take less damage, right? We get maneuverability. This isn't strictly necessary, but it does let you sort of like float and move your character while you're up in the air. If you're really, really precise with your dash trajectory, like the beginning of the dash, then this isn't necessary. And in builds where it's sort of tighter, this is one of the things that I would take out, right? I'd be like, this is one of the points that I would compromise on. Since we're not on one of those builds, we keep it. I take the 100% mitigation chance when performing a dash. This works whether you're in the air or not, right? And then I take the 100% dash range, right? So this basically means we will mitigate. So all we need to know about is our mitigation strength, right? We're not in the air, but if we do the dash in the air, then this applies. If not, then it doesn't. And then we're getting to our target. We want to have as much movement capacity as possible. And then here, slippery, normal, parkour, basically a must-have on every build. Slide distance, I don't power slide in this game, so not my thing. Muscle memory, if you are going to be utilizing guns, if you're utilizing this build in addition to guns, let's say you're like, I want to use shotgun or whatnot, I want to use these other perks to grab these other guns, right? Then pick up muscle memory. Right, and probably also pick up multitasker so that you can shoot while sprinting, you can shoot while, and you can reload while sprinting. Right, I would pick up these two if I'm applying any guns in there. We didn't. This build doesn't, wasn't designed around that, and the concept was to basically grab Gorilla Fist from as early a level as possible and punch the world to death. So feel free to do that if you want. Lastly, body tree. This is the most important tree for our build. It's the most important tree for leveling, right? If you're going to do similar to, like I said, where you grab a set of Gorilla Fists, put them on, and that's your weapon, right? Shotguns will help, sure, but every point put in here, especially early when you don't have perk points, every point put in here, hurts your ability to do this. So we'll go over this real quickly. Most important, door fed. right? So obviously you have to get this. Most important is Dwarf Head. All right, this gives you 100% mitigation chance after you use a health item, right? Which for 2 seconds. This is a nice long time. As if you pump your mitigation strength, then you basically say, I'm going to be as close to invulnerable, right? Because I believe you can cap your mitigation strength at 90%. If you get to 90% mitigation strength, then popping this basically puts you at, I'm only going to take 10% damage regardless, right? And that's from mitigation, which I believe is different than Pyromania's damage reduction, right? So you'd be damage reducing, and then you'd be taking 10% of that damage, right? Whichever way that happens mathematically, which one comes first, I don't know, right? But I believe they are separate. So this makes you super tanky as long as your mitigation strength is high, and we're also doing damage mitigation. Health regen per percent missing health. I think this is super good, especially when you have high health builds. Now we are technically reducing our health quite a bit with the different consumables that we use on the run. So this isn't super helpful, but otherwise, and in generally speaking, this is a nice piece, right? And then we have increased health rate while sprinting, should affect all of these others, and then increased regen while nearby enemies are there. We are always surrounded with enemies when we're doing our thing, so this, if that's going to help us with our health packs and stuff like that, then or just even if it's just slow health regen is increased by 10% per enemy. If we have 10 enemies, that's 100%. Maybe that's worthwhile. And then this is sort of the tree that everybody goes for. If you're only going for a 15 body build, right, because you want these things, you're going for Juggernaut. You're going for Adrenaline Rush, right? So that's what's going to get here, right? Unlocking it, utilizing it, percentage of your stuff gets converted to adrenaline, right, etc., etc. While Adrenaline Rush is active, you get movement speed and damage. That's why we're here. This Calm Mind makes it so that it doesn't delay as fast. All right, so this basically means when you have Adrenaline Rush and it's available, right, it's gonna stay available until necessary, right, until it starts to decay. But that decay is gonna start slower, right? So this sort of just is Adrenaline Sustain. And then Adrenaline Rush gives you immunity to certain movement penalties and statuses, knockdown, etc. So it's really nice to not get CC'd, right? Berserk gives you immunity to damage, but not necessarily to CC, right? If it's constantly, firing off with a biomonitor and keeping your health up, which is keeping your adrenaline rush up, which is then preventing you from getting knocked down, that's super good, super big, right? But these are in tier 3, right? So when you're leveling, you're going to be starting out right here. Now these are super important. Obviously you have to get these two. That gives you the shoulder charge thing. It doesn't show it in here, but when you have Gorilla Fist, you just put your elbow out and run forward. It's the same basic function. Super good. This breakthrough is the first point I get. I believe it seems like it's really, really good comparative to, I'm not sure what enemy armor is. I haven't seen any math on what enemy armor looks like in this game. I know, in games like Skyrim, armor pen doesn't really matter much because the enemies never get enough armor for armor pen to actually matter. But in this game, it feels that way. And I don't know what the math is. I don't know if this is mathematically worse than this one, but I believe this is good, right? And perks early are going to come, right? So I get this one, and then I get this one, Kinetic Absorption. The blocking gives us 30% damage with weapons for 5 seconds, right? The stamina's not really a big problem, especially when we're berserking, but I believe that blocking, right, is not specific to just block and not counterattack, because counterattack is technically just a perfectly timed block. I believe that this percent damage increase does apply after a counterattack. Now this one, counterattacks give increased chance to stun and give you increased knockdown chance with defensive attacks, right? So this is just fun. We're looking for the stun chance because stunned enemies have I believe a higher chance to get thresholded, right? With our with our up here, right? enemies affected by stun are more susceptible to this enemy health finisher, right? Which is super important because we're running this knockback. Additionally, fly swatter happens. It's range damage. This is more of a end game function. This is more early game. So if I was to, if I'm starting off, I'm going 1, 2, 3. Then I'd probably leave this one until I have this one. I don't need this specific ability, right, until I'm ready for the finishers to happen based off the stun. So I'd probably just take these 3, and then I'd be headed to Quake as quickly as possible, along with gathering these things. Quake isn't something that we utilize as a DPS. I think it's a DPS loss over, just continuously attacking. However, it is nice when you pair it with these things over here. You get health for every enemy hit by Quake and stamina for every enemy hit by Quake. So I find it a really good thing. Like if you're running from one place to the other and you're draining your stamina during the run, you do the charge, and then I usually break early and just let the Quake hit as many people rather than knocking them over. Right? You can do, I think there's a whole setup, right, where you Quake charge, or you charge in, knock them down, and then jump up and Quake them, right? It's a lot of fun. It kills a lot of things. It's pretty hilarious, but I don't use it that way. I'm only ever really using this to regenerate stamina and health so I can stand in there and start smacking people in the face again. With that being said, because we do utilize it, we go ahead and get the epicenter because any extra damage based off of that thing is going to be good. If we can Quake somebody into the finisher combo, then we can start throwing people around and whatnot. I'm not a big fan of the throwing people around, but it does have some really neat interactions. Like, for example, in the first floor when the white coat security guard of the Don't Fear the Reaper run, when he comes out, right, and he's got the security key, if you Quake this guy and get the finisher function so you can lift him up, just doing this savage sling when you lift him up is like auto kill, right? It's not like he's actually dead, but you're going to have to throw him regardless, right? But it loots his body instantaneously, so you get the access card the moment you pick him up. So that's a pretty interesting, like, little hidden interaction that happens. I use Quake proactively. Feel free to charge in, hit somebody, and then Quake them, by all means, right? It's a lot of fun. Just not how I do it. I like to stand in and punch. And then Pain to Gain, this is 20% health recharge whenever Adrenaline Rush is active and we neutralize an enemy. Now, basically with our setup, we're ping-ponging, we're getting health all the time, etc., etc. We should basically always have Adrenaline Rush up, and that means we're getting 20% health item recharge, which, is increased by the 5% recharge that we also get from the tech tree, right? So we get 25% every time we kill something, and then we also have natural percentage recharge. And then if we're low on our health and we kill something, it's 100%. We just get an automatic charge. So this is a whole lot of just generic general sustain, right, to allow us to sort of bounce off the bottom of our health bar. And that's, I think that's it, right? Obviously, Relic. The only one that I'll talk about, we have them all, right? But the only one I'll talk about that you don't need, right? Pick them all, grab them all. You absolutely want, is it Little Removal? Yeah, Gorilla Arm Shockwave. This is our, like, you want Jailbreak, right? You want this Shockwave. That's what you want, right? These two are absolutely required, and then I would always get vulnerabilities, because there's nothing wrong with those. The only one that is bad, right, or can actively work against you is this. If you are crouching, right, this is great for stealth gameplay, etc., etc., but in Don't Fear the Reaper runs, right, if you're going for speed, sometimes I like to crouch, right, while I'm waiting for enemies to sort of like do their thing. If I'm crouched and they detect me or I start becoming detected, this does a time slow. Now the time slow is not terrible, But what it does is it makes it so, like, let's say I get into the elevator and I'm crouched when I get into the elevator, and then that mechanical droid, the robot, drops down. If I'm still crouched, it will slow time, which means that I'm going to be spending extra time waiting for that. And so, like, real time, obviously, on my time tracker, that doesn't slow down, but the gameplay does. So this is also the reason why I got rid of the reflex tuner and some of the other time slow effects out of my character build when I did the Don't Fear the Reaper run, because it was making it so much slower. Right, I probably saved 20 or 30 seconds, right, off of my time frame. That's a guess. Yeah, it was probably about 20 seconds of time frame where, like, I was in revulsor and I couldn't get out of it. Right, I had to wait for it to go, stop. Right, but like, I finished the last enemy and entered a dialogue function where Johnny needs to speak, but he's speaking super slow, and I've got to wait for my slow time effect to finish. So, this has, I think, 11 points off. I've got it built in the build planner, so that should be in the description. All right. Feel free to follow that if that's what if you need to re-reference that rather than watching the video again. And then cyberware. Here we go. This is super. I don't know if it's generic, but at least in depth, right? Axolotl is basically all the time. Yeah, I get it on every character, right? Like anything that uses everything except for like Chrome compressor build, right? Axolotl is huge, right? So grab this whenever you need to, right? Quantum tuner, send Songbird to the moon, get the quantum tuner, allows us to basically chain our berserks back to back or our sandys back to back, etc., etc. Super good. Crazy good, right? I chose the Mechatronic core. It does not give us any specific bonus against Smasher, but it does give us bonuses against other robots. So when we get those big robots in the middle of the areas, etc., there's like 3 or 4 total big robots in the Don't Fear the Reaper run, right? We get this amount. Because it's conditional based off of the mechs. I believe this is a separate multiplier. So in that video, in my 339 run, I believe both mechs dropped. Right? Like I delayed my punch for like a half a second. Both mechs dropped, and I killed both mechs with one punch. Right? So like that was huge, right? Gorilla arms, bar none, best are electrifying. Don't let anybody tell you any different, right? The physical ones put on bleed. Bunch of like robots are immune to bleed, and I'm not trying to wait for somebody to bleed out, right? I'm not trying to like stack bleeds. There's no like bleed stacking function that I can see, and like the damage that we get to is so crazy that bleed is basically minimal. Same thing with burn. Burn damage does great. You're going to put a dot on them. Yes, it might kill somebody later, but what do I care, right? I'm not worried about it. They do have different attunements. So if you're not doing I'm doing 20 technical. If you were doing another build that's not doing 20 technical, then you might not want to go with electrical damage because you're going to be attuned to something different, potentially. All right, and then same thing with poison, but Smasher, I believe, has either resistance or immunity to fire and poison. Right, so the only thing he really doesn't have a resistance to is electrical. So you could like he's got like 60% physical res, I think it is, some crazy number, right? So like electrifying gorilla arms are the way to go. He doesn't have a vulnerability, but he doesn't have a resistance to them, right? In addition to that, electrical damage is something that you can get on your modifiers. So if you see on these, I have 3.2 melee, 1.5 reload, and 6.4 electrical damage, right? That means that I can push the electrical damage on this, right? So in theory, right, I believe electrical damage, at least in the math formula, is on an additive level, right? So it basically melee damage and electrical damage are equal. Right? So in that case, if we believe that to be true, and I assume that to be true, then this particular set of arms, because it got both melee and electrical, is actually a 9.6, which is significantly higher than even the maximum 7.5 melee damage that I could have gotten. So even though I got a shitty 3.2 melee roll, right? The 6.4 electrical damage, because they're additive, increases that. And because he doesn't have a resistance to electrical damage, then we're not reducing that damage by anything. So don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Electrical damage is the way to go. The ideal, right, perfect rolls for all of these would be melee damage 7.5, electrical damage I think can also go to 7.5 or 7.8, and then probably crit damage. Since we're already getting to our crit cap, right, I would go with, you know, crit damage, which I think can go to like 2 or something like that. If you got that on 20 pieces of gear, you're doing pretty solid. Dense Marrow, basically mandatory for any and every melee build. It is a massive chunk of melee damage. I don't think it's a separate multiplier. I believe it's it's a additive multiplier, or additive in the bucket. But it's 27%. It's, you know, that's almost four of, you know, these cyberware things. Spring joints I chose because we were a little tight. We're tight because of some of the choices on that, like the quantum tuner, the axolotl, the cockatrice, and the deep field visual here. All right, that's a lot of cyberware capacity requirement. So we chose something that was cheaper, but also gave us mitigation strength. Since we have several ways to get to a 100% mitigation chance, we chose to increase our mitigation strength. Additionally, this grants a, you know, it talks about like mitigation chance, what it is, and the default strength is 50%. So if the default is 50%, and this is giving us an additional 19%, right? And we know we can't get past 90. So this means we're at 69. With, I'll skip down here real quick. With this, which also gives mitigation chance, we're at 70. We're at another 11 strength, that's 80. Right? So we're 10% off of capped mitigation chance, or mitigation strength, just from these two pieces. So we chose mitigation strength, and then utilizing 100% mitigation chance through blood, you know, utilizing of health items, etc., etc. Bionic joints, just cheap armor with a decent function, right? They are just cheap armor. They're 6 cyberware capacity, but they have a really high armor function. They have an extra armor from their technical attunement, and then get there, right? If you chose not to go with some of these, or you maybe you did the 9 intelligence, so you had 4 more, you might have space for a different version. Maybe go get something with 8 or 10 capacity. That's possible, but this is what we ended up with here for this setup. Deep field visual interface, sort of counterintuitive, right? It's really expensive. It hurts us on a lot of capacity, right? If you choose not to go with this, you can choose for a couple things, but we were optimizing specifically for damage, so we went for that special attunement, which is cool attunement, which gives us 1% crit damage per attribute point. Now, cool's normal function is 0.5% per attribute point. So at 18 cool, right, we have this one piece of cyberware is effectively worth 36 cool points of cool, and that is insane. That's massive. So we chose to go with that. If you're okay with reducing the crit damage, right? Maybe you're gonna do something else and you're gonna crank the electrical. You're gonna do the double. You're gonna go for, you know, the double. You're gonna get 6% melee damage and 6% electrical damage on everything, right? Then maybe you don't need to crank the percentage of, you know, maybe you don't need 18% increase on your you know, critical damage itself, right? Maybe you don't need that, right? So you change this to a regular cortex, and then you have, you know, space for a parabellum or something, or maybe a epimorphic skeleton for extra health and stuff like that. Pick what you want, right? But this specifically optimized for just damage. This was you know, this was basically going into a secondary multiplier. I already have 100 and some odd percent crit damage, and I don't get the extra crit damage until I pop Berserk. So this was the best bang for my buck. Adrenaline converter. This is, you know, the movement speed increase. It does sort of do slow, but it's specifically when we enter combat. So it doesn't slow me down. It just makes us faster, right? So this works out really, really well. Neofiber we sort of went over. We're after the mitigation chance or the mitigation strength, and the chance doesn't hurt because it gives us a natural chance just whenever we're doing general function. But when we do utilize our functions that give us 100% chance, then the chance is useless, but the strength is important. Pain Editor gives us a negative 7% natural with another 1.8 from our cool attunement. That's just sort of like a no-brainer there for me. It's just flat percentage decrease of damage. This comes out to, I think, 8.8%, so almost 9%. Stack in the Pyromania that we already have at 50%, so now we're taking 68% less damage whenever Pyromania is up. I call that a win. Right? You could trade this out for something else, maybe nanoplating or countershell or the upgraded version of countershell. Maybe you want peripheral inverse or something like that where you have more melee resistance. I don't find any of those to actually keep me more alive. Maybe the one where, like, when you're not looking at things, right, the armor's more effective. That would probably go really well if you removed the deep field visual interface, put on like a parabellum and managed to get an epimorphic skeleton. If you could do something like that, you'd probably have 11, 12, like maybe 1100 armor, and then you'd also get, it'd be 50% or 60% more effective, right? But I haven't found, 15. Like, I've had my Crowpresser build at like almost 1500 armor, and he's squishy, right? He's not as squishy as this character if he gets looked at without Berserk, but he can't just stand out there and tank, right? You have to have max armor and have just a natural 90% mitigation strength with 100% mitigation, and some way to just pop your health potion over and over and over again to maintain 100% mitigation strength. If you got there, you'd be tanky as balls. But since I'm not, I take Pain Editor. Optical camo, kind of went over this with the other skills and stuff like that, but gets us in and out of stealth, which allows us to perpetuate several different buffs. But more importantly, this allows us to interact with certain things during the run without being shot at, without being interrupted, etc., etc. So overall, we use this as a tactical function rather than as a damage modifier, damage increase, though it does have some viability there. And then Shock and Awe, this is crazy good because it goes off that 10% chance, goes off all the time because we are, especially when we're in Berserk and we're tanking a bunch of damage, we got 10, 15 people shooting at us that can't kill us, right? Because we can't be reduced below 25%, but they're still attacking us and hitting us with this stuff, proccing this chance. So we are, in addition to generating our own EMP explosion from popping the Berserk, and then if we have Fury up, that's popping its own explosions, right? This just is a fantastic way to maintain Pyromania and a fantastic way to have some crazy good AoE, right? That is just centralized off your body. So I think this is the best function here, right? Obviously, optical camo has some very, very specific functions, and it sort of can't be replaced. But if I was gonna be like, I got to take one off, I'd take Pain Editor off. I'd change this, right? Because these two are basically what I would consider mandatory on this build. Double jump. I don't think there's any other option. It's always double jump. Micro rotors for melee attack speed. This does mean that we drop the blood pump. We drop the blood pump because blood pump does more healing, but it is over time, and we didn't want the over time. We wanted the immediate health right off the bat, right? Which we get significantly more snapshot, like right off the bat health from a regular max stock. So we chose not to go with the blood pump. We went with the regular max stock. The bio monitor still takes it just the same. So we're just getting these bigger spikes. It makes us ping pong more, but we're not ever in a situation where we're dying, waiting for the health to come up. right? Like when this goes off, we're at 100% health. When this goes off, we're at 100% health, right? Rather than having us go to 20% health and waiting for the next 15 seconds to get the last, 100% health out, right? We'll take more damage in that time frame and need to be back into Berserk by then. So we chose the max stock, so we got rid of the biome, or we got rid of the blood pump, and we went with micro rotors, and that allows us to get a heal on kill, which means that when we're killing people, we are actively increasing our health, which means even in Berserk, right, we're popping our health up, right? They then pull it down, allows us to activate the 25%, get a new charge of health, etc., etc. And so we get to sort of like ping pong a lot. This helps with the ping pong, but more importantly, it also helps because when your Berserk ends, you'll be at 100% health when it finishes, but now if you kill one person, right, you get a percentage of your health back, right? Along with, right, the mitigation chance, etc. You have more time, less opportunities for you to just get insta-gibbed outside of your Berserk, right? Then we have the Tiger Claws. I didn't have a bunch of space, obviously. I have 0 space, so I use the Tiger Claws, the Dermal Imprint, right? I managed to get a perfect roll on melee damage, so I was super happy. No real explanation there, just get some damage, right? Melee damage. This is just here for melee damage. This could be anything. If you made some other choices here, you might choose, and you had more space, you might choose, I'd be fine with getting a smart link, right? I don't need a handle wrap. Handle wrap is for, throwing knives and blades type things, I believe, right? Yeah, headshot, weak spot damage, and then crit chance with throwables, right? Throwable weapons. I'm not doing a throwable weapons build. You can. Berserk works with thrown weapons, which is crazy, but not necessary here. And like I said, we took the ambidextrous off because we're only using this one set. Cockatrice size, 35% crit chance. That's all we're here for. And obviously we got a decent, 5.8 melee roll. Could be better, obviously. This doesn't ever give us anything, and we're not doing it to intelligence, so we don't get any flat damage percentage increase off of that. And then the big kicker is Biodyne Berserk. We're after the maximum damage, right? Which is why we have this one. The 30% attack speed, 20% crit, and 100% crit damage does not apply naturally. It only applies during the time frame that Berserk is up. In addition to that, the the reflex attunement at the very bottom gives us the 1% crit chance during Berserk. That is additive to the already static 20% crit. So at a 5++, you're at 20% crit, and I'm at 20 reflexes, so that's another 20% crit. That is how we get 40% crit out of this specific cyberware, allowing us to make it to 98%, 108 after we've got the thing. Now, because we're getting 40 here, 10% from in melee, we're at 50. Cockatrice size takes up 35. That's 85% crit chance just in these two things, plus having 50 levels in solo, right? That means we only need 15% to be accomplished by our base reflexes, which is going to 20, which means that we're getting, 10% out of there? Yeah, half a percent crit chance, right? So what's that? That's another 10 because we're at 20. All right, so we're at 95% crit chance just by having max reflexes and these two items. That's solid, right? That means you this thing, anything that's cool attuned or reflex attuned that gives us 2% chance to crit is going to basically do it. We need what, three items like this in total. All right, we have more, but 3 items would basically get you to 101% crit, right? Just off base, just off stats. So, at least while you're in here. If you took the Militech Berserk, you wouldn't have that. You'd be 40% less. You'd be somewhere around 60%. You do, however, get a couple other things. This is a 5, not a 5++. unfortunately, right? So I believe the duration increases and the cooldown decreases. So this goes to like 15 and 25 or 20 and 25 or something like that for its duration versus cooldown. But it gets percentage damage during Berserk, which is 10%, and then it also gets at the bottom, and then it also gets 50% if you're below 20% health from its top part. Now, that would total 60%, right? Now, it's also conditional based off the Berserk, so I believe it would then be multiplicative. If it was multiplicative, in theory, it probably beats out the Biodyne Berserk in damage. However, this means that you have to be at or below 20% health. Then you have to pop your Berserk, and which is going to prevent all damage because it has immunity to all damage, right? But then you have to keep your health that low in order to gain that damage. Right? Unless it snapshots. I don't know if it does, but if it snapshot, that'd be better, right? If it doesn't snapshot and it's based off of your current health, and it's dynamically based off of that during the Berserk thing, you have to prevent yourself from gaining health. Now you're gonna generally gain health from, right? Like if you use your optical camo before you use your Berserk, you're going to get some health from kills. Like if you have other things in the tree that give you health from kills, you're going to slowly increase your health, right? And worse yet, if you're running a bio monitor, then it's going to automatically use your health kit when you're down below that certain percent. So it's going to fire off, and when it fires off, it's going to give you health that's going to take that damage away from you. So if this doesn't snapshot, the likelihood that you ever have that 60%, and if it is multiplicative. If it's additive, it doesn't win at all, right? Because the 100% additive onto the crit damage, which is a separate multiplier, right, is going to beat out the 60% additive that's on a different multiplier, right? If it was multiplicative, it's bar none better damage, right? It's for sure better damage. However, if it's multiplicative and it snapshots, it would have to be multiplicative. It has to snapshot in order for you to really gain value and have it beat out the Biodyne. And even then, it's a super risky way to play, because in order to get back into it, you need to either take enough damage to come back down, right? To the bottom, because this is going to heal you when it ends. It's going to heal you for 25% for every enemy you killed. So it's going to full health you. Then you have to hit basically below 20% health again before you re-enter Berserk. Right? Otherwise, you're only getting 10%. And that if that's multiplicative, I don't think that 10%, even as a separate multiplicative multiplier, is going to beat out a full 100% crit. I don't think so. I don't think it does. So this is by far, the Militech is by far probably the easier, lazier, more general way to play the Berserker Barbarian or type thing, like archetype, because you get the invulnerability. It allows you to save your health packs, right? You're going to have basically full health packs when you come out. You're going to be able to go, it has a better duration to cooldown ratio, so you're going to be able to utilize it with less friction, right? There's going to be less times where you don't kill enough enemies to get back into Berserk when you need to, etc., right? Like it's the easier way to play it. It just doesn't have the power spike, right? It could have the power spike, but that power spike is designed around a whole other set of risk, right? If this was like Borderlands, where it had health gating and you take a big punch of damage and that would hit you down to 0, right, or close to 0, but then you had immunity for a time frame, then that'd be different, right? It would have to snapshot to do that, right? Like if we had health gate and snapshot, this would be insane, right? I don't think there'd be any contest. It'd be the best. But without confirmation of those, there's no way. I'm going Biodyne every time, and I want my crit. I want my 40% crit. And that should be the whole build. That should be sort of like starter stats where you start at. If you want to sort of see how I resolve and go through the whole scenario, by all means go watch the Throwing Hands playthrough. And if not, then I hope you enjoyed it, right? Like I said, I'll have the link for the build in the description for any of you that just want those or want to reference it again. And yeah, let me know if you want another breakdown like this for any of the other builds or any of the other characters that I have on the channel. Or even if you're like, hey, I have a concept, right? Because this is one of the things I really love to do. If somebody says, I have a concept, an idea, right? This is sort of what I'm thinking about and what I want to use. Is there a way that we can sort of like make that work? And by all means, right? I'm happy to throw my hat in the ring and try to like make a build that makes something work like that. I mean, I made a Here's Johnny build that just uses power pistols, which are terrible, right? And it basically turned into sort of like the stealth pistol build that goes around, and that's pretty normal, right? But because of the way he's built, you could definitely use a Mandalorian or a commander or something like that, right? So by all means, let me know what you want to see. And until then, thanks for showing up. Thanks for watching the video, and I will catch you next time.